Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by the supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together. Hello and welcome to this side of the gate, and tonight I have my favorite co-host, Mr. Steve Stockton. Say hi to everybody, Steve.
Hi, everybody, Steve. Hi, Cisco. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here as always.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, sweetie. I'm so glad you are here. We had a lot of technical shuffling around. We did some juggling, but by golly, I think we figured this out. And we have our very good friend. Now, let me tell you a little something. Steve has this uncanny ability to, when he started writing books, he would then meet people along the way who were either inspired by why Steve started writing the books that Steve did, or he inspired them just by saying what he said to me. If you don't write the stories down, they're going to get lost, and you really should share them with everybody. And he met a gentleman, and then I was introduced to him, and we have grown to love him so much. And now, Steve's known him longer than I have, but I feel like I've known Mark for a very long time. He's a wonderful storyteller. He has a fantastic book out called Wyatt's Weird World. And I've listened to him tell stories on many podcasts and talking back and forth. Please welcome, without further ado, Mr. Mark Anthony Wyatt. Hello and welcome, Mark.
Wow, thank you. I was looking around for another Mark Wyatt there.
But thank you. I appreciate good to put a voice with the face and the writing now.
Isn't it funny,
though? First
time
we've actually spoken.
Yeah, and all three of us at once. All three of us at once together in one spot, because Steve, you've been talking to Mark back and forth, and throwing stories back and forth for a while. And then Mark and I started talking and doing the same thing, and we just all come together. This is a wonderful subject because it really does bring a lot of people together. Does it not,
Just a quick shout out to Soraya Ascath, WVBR, Where'd the Road Go?
Yes.
He's the glue that really got it all together.
Absolutely.
Because he hooked me and Cisco up, and then I think that's the way Mark discovered me, was on his show.
I believe it was, yeah.
And then there's some other people in the wings that are working on books that I've done the same thing with, so this is great.
Yeah.
Isn't it wonderful? And we all love Zariah, and we can never get a hold of him. We only hear, he's just a voice that comes out of our speakers. He's very hard to get a hold of. He's a very busy man. So we love you, Zariah.
Yeah. He's one of a very small handful that, we listen to.
Oh my gosh.
We try a lot. We listen to loads and loads and loads.
I love to hear him break a subject apart and break it down the way he does. I mean, what a mind he has. He's absolutely amazing.
He has all this esoteric knowledge.
He does.
Truly magical things, so that type of magic with a K type stuff.
Yeah, he's amazing. If you guys haven't listened, if the listeners, I know I've spoken about it before, but Where Did the Road Go? Absolutely wonderful podcast. Absolutely check it out. So, and we're all here because of him. So thank you, Zariah. So Mark, tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, are you still residing across the pond, or have you hopped the pond for good? What are you doing?
I spend a lot of time in Illinois. And I'm probably about 6 months all told in a year, really, maybe more. I sort of go back and forth quite a lot.
That's great.
I love both areas. I mean, my true home is Cornwall. That's where I feel most at home. Or England generally, but I do like it here. It's the lovely people, really lovely.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I can imagine now you're starting to be able to collect. I know you've been collecting stories and just talking to people. And how does it? I'm going to say, I think before you say anything, that it doesn't differ much from one side to the other. I know history, which sounds silly to say, history goes back so far, because history just is history. But you have so many areas there that are still, you still have castles standing. that you can walk through, where our history just seems to go back only so far. We're a very young country compared to
yes.
yours.
I mean, the house I'm in now is it's a beautiful old house. It's Janice's house. It's, well, say old. It's 1911, which isn't really old at all, because not to me.
Right.
I've lived in quite a few Victorian places which sort of go back slightly longer, sort of 1890s or whatever, late 1890s. So it's slightly older. But down here, where I am now in Illinois, and it's a beautiful area with these lovely porches. I probably got the wrong words. The porches on the front.
Oh, yeah.
There's beautiful trees everywhere. They're beautiful houses. And it's called the Historic District. Now, to me, it's not
it almost seems silly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like built 5 minutes ago,
Uh-huh. Yes.
I went to college with a guy who was from Britain, and he would talk about his house was only 300 years old. It wasn't really that old.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, you guys, you can go back. I just recently talked to a friend of mine, Rob Guthrow, who took a tour through England, and he went through all of the different, as a medium, taking a tour. And I thought, oh my gosh, Mark, how did you do it? Because, you must have been bumping into everybody. And there's that also that brings up to me, I don't know what you guys have heard, but how many times have you heard different things like ghosts only last so long, like their energy dissipates and fades away? Or what do you think about that? What do you think about that?
I think it's possible, highly possible, because you do hear of, big ghost stories of the past, but they just don't show up anymore. So it's almost like they've either been called away to go somewhere else, or it's worn out, the recordings.
Yeah, maybe they dissipated. I read an account one time of what was considered to be one of the oldest hauntings known, and it was in the UK, where a guy had observed Roman soldiers marching through his basement.
That's right, yeah, popular one, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to think about that one. I think, Mark, you and I talked about that one, because I think that was on my first episode. And because I looked at it differently, I kind of looked at it where, because they were walking, they were walking on the Roman road, which I think was a little higher than what the actual road was in this basement that was going through. It almost seemed like a recording in time to me, like almost like a residual, or what the like a repeat. They didn't seem to notice him. I wouldn't say it was an intelligent haunting, where if one of them had looked at him and said, what are you doing, sonny boy? What are you looking at? That would have been a whole totally different thing.
Yeah. Didn't they seem unaware of him, if I remember right?
Yeah, I think so too.
And he was quite sort of scared. Well, he said they were quite small as well, which sort of fits in with what we do know. We do know they were small.
Oh my gosh, Mark, though, to be able to look at them and see that, the weary look in their face, and the fact that they had stubble on their face and, needed a shave because they had been gone away for, so long. And, it's just, that was an amazing haunting story for him, a tale that never changed. And I believe there was other Roman soldiers seen throughout that home, or whatever you want to call it now. I didn't know whether it was a museum.
I think it was, wasn't it near the York City walls? I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing, but the original thought being, okay, well, if ghosts can only last so long, let's just say the theory, then how come people are still bumping into and having intelligent hauntings with people from 500, 600 years ago? Because you hear stories about that. Is it Anne Boleyn that runs through the halls? To escape. Was it Anne Boleyn that escaped with Henry VIII, and she ran down the hall? Is that the one?
Are you talking about my strange experience that I had? Or are you talking just generally?
I'm just talking.
Yeah, because I had a very strange experience concerning. I haven't sort of thought about this for a long time, but
please tell.
Do you want to hear this?
Yes, I absolutely do.
Absolutely.
Well, I was trying to. I had a friend. I still have a friend who's he worked for English Heritage, which is like, they look after the English heritage, the old castles and the stately homes and all this sort of stuff. And he's like a custodian. And he's moved around various different jobs, around the north of England. And I used to live up there. I lived up near Newcastle for about 10 years. And I had two strange experiences up there in English heritage property. Well, one was an English heritage, the other one might have been a national trust, but it's a similar type of thing. Well, I'll tell you about the second one, because it's a lot quicker. The second one was his wife also worked at English heritage properties, and she had been working at Prudhoe Castle, which was where I lived, and that's where I had that first strange experience. And she moved off to another job further north, about 15, 20 miles north, in a place called Ashington, which is like a coal mining area. And she said, "Oh, come up and see me at my new job. We've got an open day." And it was a beautiful summer's day. And cut a long story short, I was wandering around there with my children, who were young then. They were sort of, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, that sort of age group. And we were just walking through. There were people everywhere, sort of, going in both directions. And it's a colliery. I don't say the word like, like a gold coal mine. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea of this place was to show you what the conditions were like for the coal miners years ago, and to show you how they worked and what they did. And there was even like a small pit which you could go down, and they turned the lights out so that you could see how dark it was without candles and so on. And you literally couldn't see a hand in front of your face. Oof. But anyway, when we were walking along the top, it was a beautiful summer day, and I saw this guy coming towards me. And I can still picture him today. The best description of him would be to say he looked a bit like, do you remember the Dick Van Dyke? No, Dick Van Dyke, and he was in Mary Poppins.
Yes.
And he was like the world's worst Cockney. Mm-hmm. And he had the worst accent ever.
Chimney sweep.
He was appalling. But anyway, he looked a little bit like that, in that he was stockier than that. He was quite tall. He was taller than me, actually. And I'm 6'1", so when he walked past me, he was taller than me. Wow. And he had like a collarless shirt on, which was dirty. It was a white shirt once, but it was like filthy. He had a jacket on, like I think he had like a waistcoat jacket, trousers, boots, big black boots. Everything about him was he was covered in coal dust. Mm. And I could sort of see the whites of his eyes, which is the thing that I sort of remember when I'm thinking about it now. Anyway, he walked towards me, towards all of us. And I was just staring and thinking, wow, that's really impressive. I just naturally assume, and this happens to me so many times, maybe 5 or 6 times, that I assumed he was like a role player, I forget the word, a reenactor. Mm-hmm. So I was just staring at him as he was walking towards me, and he seemed to be sort of grinning slightly. And as he walked past, I turned around to watch him go. He was not there.
Wow.
And that has happened to me before several times, as I say, with different figures. And I was just so surprised. I could not believe it, And I thought, well, he couldn't have really gone anywhere. There was nowhere he could have sort of slipped away. And I think what they do, and I've probably said it before, I came up with this phrase, I think when I was writing that book, to describe that experience. And I call them walk-bys. Mm-hmm. Because I'm pretty sure that somehow they target certain people who they know, maybe they know that certain people can see them, I don't know. Mm. But they sort of target us, and then it's like their little party pieces, like, nah, I'm going to show myself to this guy or that lady. And it's not at all scary, it's just like they are normal, they are us.
Right.
But when you turn around, they're not there.
Absolutely.
They're solid. They're not there. I mean, I've seen sort of sketchy ghosts as well, like sort of watercolors, but most of the time they're solid. Mm.
Isn't that amazing?
Sorry, I'm digressing, but
no, I love that story because, well, it reminds me of experiences for one, and I love the term walk-bys. I love that term.
I just think it sums it up, really.
It does. It really, really does. And the fact that they have that little grin, like they know that you know.
Like they're playing us. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Although it's not always a grin. I mean, the character I saw at Prudhoe Castle, that was incredible. I feel silly telling all these stories, really, but it's like
no, please, that's what you're here for. Tell us.
Well, I suppose it's just there are things I don't think about much, and then all of a sudden it's like buses; they all come along at once. So that guy, I saw this guy, and I put it in the first book. So I was with those same people. He was a custodian. At the time they were at Prudhoe Castle, which is 12th century French. When the Normans went over, like a couple of hundred years later, 150, whatever it was, they built all these castles, and that was one of their castles, and it's spelt Prudhoe, which is Prudhoe, which means Proud Heights, and it's a beautiful old castle. And I'd been there dozens of times and never seen anything. I used to leave that place at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, after having a few drinks with my friends, and and I'd always be a bit worried about leaving because I thought I'm going to see something, and I don't really want to see anything. And I had to sort of do, I don't know, like a 10-minute walk, if you like, once I left them to leave, and then I had to walk down through the I don't know the name, through where the portcullis was. Across a bridge, like a moat bridge, and then down a drive. And I always thought, I'm going to see something. It's just going to happen. I'm going to be freaked out, And I never did. But when I did see something, it was when I wasn't expecting it at all.
Exactly.
I was, my kids were very young. I mean, we hung out with this I'll tell you his name, Howard, and I think I changed the names in the book, actually. And Deborah, and he had 3 kids. And I still know my kids are still friendly with them. And we were just having dinner of an evening there. And there was, I think Howard was locking up. He locked up everything at the end of the day. As I say, he was a custodian. He was totally responsible for that whole property. And he basically sent me down, I can't remember what it was now, but he sent me to go and get something from, I think he was doing like a promotion or something for the next day. And he needed me to go and get something, I forget what it was, papers or something. And I couldn't go back down the way that I would have normally come up because everything had been locked. And he said, if you head this way, and he told me which way to go. And it meant going into another area of the castle where you never went. It just wasn't open to the public. And it was all lit. There wasn't a problem with anything like that. It was all lit, and it was just like heading over to the far side. And cutting a long story short, when I came down the other stairs to go back to the place where I knew, once I was down the stairs, I knew where I was again, I heard footsteps, like really loud echoing footsteps. And I thought, well, that's strange, because I knew that nobody was in the castle except for those people I just left, which was Howard, his wife, my wife, and our sort of 6 kids, and me. And unless somebody had been locked in by accident, there was nobody there. And when I heard these footsteps, they got closer and closer, and sort of louder and louder. And then I saw this guy coming out of this room sort of opposite me. I was nearly down the stairs, but I wasn't down the stairs. I was about, I don't know, 9-10 foot up in the air still on the steps. And I suddenly saw this guy coming out of this sort of doorway about, I don't know, 20, 30 foot away, walking towards me. And this is he actually looked, and I always have to sort of say, but it looked like the guy, but I don't think it was him. It looked like Henry VIII.
Wow.
And I do laugh when I say it because it sounds crazy, but he looked like him. What the pictures that we see in history books, that's what he looked like. And he walked towards me, and he was a big man. He was big around the middle.
Right.
Quite a big face, big head. And he was dressed in that way that you can probably picture it in all the pictures we all see of him.
Yeah.
He's sort of like tights and sort of like, I'm colourblind, but it was like sort of goldy, sort of, I don't know what you would call it, sort of bronzy sort of colours, and bright colours. Anyway, he walked towards me, and I just watched him, and my automatic reaction, as it always is in these situations, is, he's a reenactor. He's probably been working today at the castle.
Right.
Howard didn't tell me. He failed to tell me,
Yeah.
And I watched him, and as he walked past, this guy actually looked up at me, because I think I said something like, right, mate, or something stupid,
Yeah.
just a typical greeting for another bloke,
Yeah.
And he looked at me, and it was almost like a glare, like how they speak to me.
Ooh.
And then he just carried on walking, and he went, so he's sort of underneath me when he's walking, because I was on a stairway on the bottom half of it, and he sort of swept around to the right to a doorway. And he just basically ignored me. He sort of looked at me, glared at me sort of thing, then walked off. And then I thought, well, that was really freaky. And then I don't know where he went. I didn't follow him. I wasn't going to follow him. So I went to go and get the bits and pieces I had to get, and I went back. And it was quite funny when I told them what I'd seen. And it was hilarious, actually. But, to this day, I don't know what that was. But when I was writing it all down, the memory of it, I thought, well, I'd better do some research on this and find out, who, could he possibly have been there?
Right.
And it turned out that my history of that is not that great, but it turned out that one of the ladies, and I can't remember her name now, one of the ladies that I think it possibly was the second one.
Uh-huh.
I can't remember now. But one of them one of the ladies was going with Henry Percy, I think that was the name, Henry Percy. And the Percys were a big, big family in Northumberland, like very high up in the pecking order.
Right.
And his girlfriend, wife, whatever they had in those days, Henry wanted that lady, and because, he's a king.
Yeah.
and he engineered it so that he got what he wanted. And I've seen series and stuff on the box in recent years where that is fairly accurate. That's how they behaved. That's how he did stuff. And I think it's possible. It's possible he did go there. But then again, you look at pictures when you research these things. They all, people of a certain standing in society dress like that.
Absolutely.
It's how they all dressed. So basically, I just saw somebody, and maybe they copied their social betters. Maybe they wanted to look like them.
Oh, it's possible.
Like fashionable, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
the fact that he noticed you.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's the kind of the creepy part, I think.
Yeah.
He glared at you.
Yeah.
Off with your head.
Yeah, it was. It was a sort of like a how dare you even speak to me? Who are you?
Right.
But isn't it odd that they, like you say, I just can't get my head around that, because if they are they in their own time, and are they seeing us? Are we haunting them?
Yes. Absolutely.
Maybe.
That's the thing.
Sometimes.
That's the thing that I wonder all the time. Steve, I know you and I have talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
What are they perceiving us as? Are we the ghosts to them? What are they seeing? Are we in a time
strange
slip?
Visitor from the future, with all the odd clothes and a shiny vehicle,
We're just as odd to them. Are we, are we see-through-y? Are we kind of, like just almost like a mirage to them? Or, is there that time slip? And there's that famous one I always go back to. And I know, Mark, you're probably familiar with this because I know we've talked about it via text messages before. But the elevator in Gettysburg, when... remember the story for the listeners who don't know. There was an elevator in, it was Gettysburg College, and of course the famous Gettysburg Battle from the Civil War, the American Civil War. And most of the buildings that are still standing that were there then, just about every single one of them was used as a makeshift hospital or, an infirmary of some sort.
Yes.
Well,
or more.
Yeah, or morgue, yes, absolutely. They were definitely involved in the battle, no doubt, because it was all over the place. You figure you add in, what was it, like 130,000 onto a town that had less than 2,000, I think, all of a sudden. So that's amazing. So anyway, modern times, some workers that were in the Gettysburg College, they were going in the elevator to go home. They hit the button to go to their floor, and it went down to the basement.
Right.
When it opened, the doors opened, they were stunned to see almost a full reenactment of what that basement looked like as a makeshift hospital.
Wow.
There were people.
I can't remember that.
Oh my gosh, it's a great story.
That's amazing.
Oh, it is. And they're stunned. There's 3 people in the elevator and they can't really move.
They all saw that.
Right. They're watching, orderlies or, soldiers carrying soldiers back and forth. There was a surgeon who was operating, I believe, cutting a leg off of another soldier and other soldiers holding him down. Well, the thing that happened was, you first, you get that stun and then you kind of snap out of it, like, get me out of here. And you start hitting buttons and, gasping. Well, while they're doing that, the surgeon...
Which floor are you going to?
Right. Just get me out of here. The surgeon who is doing the amputation very slowly looks up at them, and I believe either with his eyes or mouthed the words, "Help me."
Wow.
And so in that moment, yes. So in that moment, here's all this commotion. Here's all this screaming and yelling and people all over the place. The place was packed with wounded. Right. And that surgeon from another time makes eye contact with these people in this time and says, "Help me."
Awesome help.
It makes you wonder, did he think they were gods or angels?
This is what I'm saying.
Was he somebody that had stepped off the elevator and couldn't get back out? And they're like, "Oh, you're from the future."
Oh, see, I didn't even think of that one. Every time I tell this story, Steve comes up with another angle I didn't think of.
And if you think of all the sort of the David Paulides type stuff as well, where people just suddenly, they've just gone, and there's no trail for them. And you think, well, it's terrifying if you just sort of stepped out of this reality into another one. And there are stories. I mean, there was a story where a lady was absolutely convinced that she'd murdered her husband in bed the night before or something. She'd gone to hand herself into a police station. She told them what she'd done.
Wow.
And they went back to the house and they checked it out. The husband was fine, but she was absolutely convinced. And she, it was talk of like timelines. That on some other timeline, she actually had done that. So maybe we're sort of jumping between timelines as well, because you have all this thing with the Mandela effect as well, where people remember things differently. And I've had a couple of tiny things like that. So I think it's highly likely, and it's frightening. That's more frightening to me than anything else. Mm-hmm. So creepy.
Well, yeah. See, now my head is really spinning. I'm 100% on the possibility of that happening. I mean, so much so, because I often talk about, the time slips. Like, okay, you're on the stairs and you see who could have been Henry VIII come through. What did he see? You saw what you saw. What did he see? He obviously, saw you. Was that a bleed over in time? Like we talk about, like, say, you picture a book, for the listeners, because I know Steve and I have talked about this, where say you have a book, that book is in the same spots, never moved, and it's in that same, square foot of real estate for eons, okay?
Right.
And then the time is layered in like the pages. Well, if some of those pages, if something happens to those pages, whether a drop of water or some kind of condensation, the pages start to, the ink from one side starts to bleed through to the other, so both sides can almost see. That's what I'm thinking of sometimes, those dimensions seem to bleed into the next. So I'm wondering if sometimes we're not just even haunting ourselves. In some case, like, am I really hearing my footsteps coming down the hall from the future or the past? It's
like that story that I had where the guy goes back and visits his childhood home, and he shows the man, like, this is a picture of me and my mom on this porch. And the guy's like, "That's the little boy that I see running around here sometime."
Oh, wow.
And the guy was like, his child self was haunting this house where he'd grown up. Now that one just blew my mind.
Yeah, I've heard of, I can't even remember who the guy was. I worked with a guy about 15, 20 years ago, and he was so, I wish I still knew him. He was so far ahead of, most people I've ever chatted to about this stuff. And he said to me one day, we were talking about ghosts, and he said, have you ever considered, he said, that when you're just sleeping in the chair of an afternoon, you might, not that I do, but, but you might be off daunting somebody, you know?
Yeah.
Just, you know, you're just astrally out there.
Yeah.
So
maybe
we don't
people in
have to
comas, you know, are out.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Haunting.
you know what, guys? No kidding. I'm at that point in my life where I'm like, it's all true. It's all possible. Because you can almost come up with, in this subject, somebody had asked me, just for instance, reincarnation. And I said, well, personally, at this point in my life, I absolutely believe in it. How do I prove it? I don't know that I can. I can show you instances. I can show you, you know, young children who talk about, you know, dying in an airplane and being able to name the crew and the plane and where he was.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't explain that. And multiple instances like that.
Yeah.
I have
It could
more
be possession,
proof.
though.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. I have more proof for it than I do against it. And that's the same way with ghosts. It's just you can't make the same thing happen over and over and over again. I mean, you could see a full apparition walk through your living room and it may never happen again.
Exactly.
It's
And the
impossible.
materialist skeptics are never going to, unless they see it repeated 20 times on the trot in a laboratory,
yeah,
they're not going to believe it.
No.
And you also have the residual hauntings where you do see the same thing played over.
True.
And over.
And then,
I think
you know,
my theory on that is a lot of times the rock in those areas, either a lot of quartz or a lot of granite.
Yeah.
And I think it records that signal somehow. Just like you think of a cassette tape, that's a ferrous oxide on that tape, and it records those signals. Same with the tape. And you play it back, and you can play it back, and you can rewind it and play it back. And eventually, like the hauntings kind of fade away, a tape will wear out when those particles fall off there. I think there's certain types of rock and sort of electrical.
Well, I think they put out a field effect. I don't think it's some byproduct, if you like, of it. Because I've been really digging into this for my book, because Cornwall is, you know, I forget what percentage, it must be like 50% or something. It's granite. It's full of granite. There's some really, really high land, you know, like you've probably heard of Jamaica Inns. Jamaica Inn's right on top of the granite, you know, Bodmin Moor. And Jamaica Inn is a classic example because it's on a granite moor and it's largely built of granite, and it's got one of the most haunted reputations in the UK. And people see, I mean, when I was writing the book, it would almost be easier to write about the people who haven't seen stuff there, because there's so much going on.
Smaller book.
Yeah, I mean, my little girl, she's not little now, she's like 39, but we went there for lunch back in the 90s, I suppose it was. And she took herself off to go to the loos. And when she came back, she was a bit excitable. And we said, what happened? She knew she was alone in this restroom, as you would say in America. And she went in, she closed the cubicle and did what she had to do. And a little gap under the door. And she saw a pair of feet where she heard sort of footsteps, saw a pair of like older ladies' feet going by. And I think she just saw shoes and like maybe a sort of 9-10 inches of a leg, maybe something like that. And they went past from left to right. And then she heard a movement of a door opening and closing. And probably, I can't remember now, but she probably heard a sigh or whatever, you know. And she finished what she was doing, went out, and as she went to wash her hands, she looked around. There was nobody in any of those cubicles. And she would have heard the door open, because it was literally like within like half a minute of her coming in, this lady, whoever she was. And there was nobody in there with her. And I mean, years later, I was looking into all that, and it happens quite a lot there. Which is a bit odd. I mean, I don't know why anyone would want to haunt
a bathroom.
On the bathroom. Well, you know, and Cisco knows about this. I've talked about it before with her.
Yeah,
I worked in an office building in Portland where a lot of times I would be one of the last, if not the very last, to leave because I was one of the closers. Yeah. And I would see a guy down the hall just as he went around the corner into the restroom. I mean, there was no other place to go. I would see, like you were saying, just the bottom part, just the shoe and part of the leg.
Yeah.
And I kept seeing this, and one day I went in there, and there was absolutely no one in there. There was no place to hide. There was no other exit.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that was all about, but
It's
I would
common,
see this guy dressed very nicely, dressed better than the people that actually worked there. And just the dress shoe and the leg of the slacks go into the restroom, and then he never would come back out.
Maybe
crazy?
He died there, yeah.
Well, see,
maybe.
that's it, Mark. There's more to this story now. You got to tell Mark the rest of the story, Steve.
Yeah, I actually did a little research, and it had been like some sort of high finance banking or stock type firm, and they ended up laying off a bunch of people. And I found out there was a guy that committed suicide in the building, and particularly in that bathroom.
In that bathroom.
No.
Well, see, before that, Steve and I was talking, and I was getting little bits of this because he was kind of texting me and talking to me, via either texting or on the phone. And I'm telling Steve, because everything was happening in this office. People were getting sick.
Like at least once a week, there was somebody taken out of there in an ambulance. And a lot of times, it would happen in the ladies' restroom, which was right through the wall. But on the other side, we had a lady go in there one day that absolutely lost her stuff. She just, they literally took her away in an ambulance.
Yeah.
And when she came back to work, she's like, I don't know what came over. She's like, I went in there and I just kind of went crazy.
That makes me think of something, actually. I go, I've been there 2 or 3 times now since I've been coming to America. We go down to a place called Eureka Springs. And I'm trying to think of the name of a hotel. It's an amazing hotel. There's at least 2 hotels there that have, in fact, we've experienced something there. And I wish I could remember the name of this place. It's really famous, actually. It's a fantastic hotel. I'll think of it in a minute. And they have a balcony really quite high up. It's in the Ozarks, basically. It's in the Ozarks. And this balcony is, 3 floors up, something like that. And they have a history of people throwing themselves off that balcony, whether they're guests or staff. And we were discussing this, and even last summer, I think it was last summer, we heard from somebody who worked in the town at another hotel that somebody else had thrown themselves off since we'd been there before. And it's a regular place they go. Now, we were thinking about this and thinking, well, I wonder whether when people go out on that balcony, they have, or some of them, have absolutely no intention of doing such a thing. And this presence that's there is talking them into it or making them down or whatever. It's doing something to them. And I think, and I said to Janice, I said, I'm never going out on that balcony. I just won't. It's like...
Well,
I do think there's something there,
There's lots to that, Mark, because, we were just talking about jumpers the other day, Steve and I. Now, because I remember you said you read our book, there's a chapter in there on jumpers. And I've often wondered how many people, if they have some kind of a weakened state, either depression or whatever it might be.
Get pushed over the edge, literally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many people does that happen to? Or it could very well be that they just get in there and they're taken over by just the emotion of the stuff.
That's what I wonder. Yeah, the last one, I think.
Yeah. Or, you just got some mean ghost up there throwing people off the balcony. I mean, it could be any of those things.
Well, we know that they are capable of. I mean, I had oh God, we could talk for weeks on this stuff, couldn't we?
Yes, we could. Yeah.
I was living I had a flat in St Ives in Cornwall. In fact, I've still got it. I'm just waiting for it to sell. And I'd stripped out most of the stuff in there to sort of put it into storage and so on. Long story. So I was sleeping there, and I'd moved the bed, and I was literally had the mattress on the carpet. I had very little in there, just enough to get me through the last few days before I moved, because it's going to sell any time. It's selling now. So I'm sort of waiting for what we call the completion date. And I was just laying there minding my own business, sleeping, and I'm convinced something hit me on the leg. And it was like being hit with a stick. Mm. It was almost like a nasty school teacher in the old days, you know.
Oh my!
It was just whack right on my thigh.
Oh my!
And it actually hurt just quickly. It didn't stay hurting. The pain didn't stay. It was like somebody had walloped me, really walloped me. And I had seen, I'd never had problems there really, but occasionally, Janice had seen sort of like orbs flying around a couple of years ago, I think. But I hadn't really had any nasty experiences there at all. And then shortly before I left there, so this is only going back about, 6 weeks or so, I'd been out during the day and I drove back in, and we've all got like parking spaces. So it's a block of, you would call them condos. And as I came, it was a beautiful day, I pulled up into the car park, went to turn right to go into my space, and I saw a guy, well, I think it was a guy, pushing a bike, a cycle, and he was sort of standing alongside it. He looked like he might be quite old and frail, and he was just grey, just everything was grey about him. Mm. I didn't see him for long enough, but my first thought was, oh, he's delivering leaflets or something, and he's looking for somewhere to lean his bike. And as I watched him, as I pulled over to my right, pulled up, and I thought, I'll go, because I had to go that way anyway. And I'd seen where he walked with his bike the last time I saw him before I turned slightly. And I went round and I was just curious. And I thought, well, I wonder where he went, because there is no back exit to that place. There's only one way in and out. And I thought, well, I wonder where he's gone. So I walked around the corner and there's no sign of him. Absolutely no sign of him. Mm. And I wondered whether that was connected to the whatever it was that hit me. I don't know. Mm. I don't know. It's just so weird. There's so many things going on. And
when you say that, I wonder if they weren't mad you were leaving.
Janice, we were talking about it, and she said, well, maybe he lived in your flat a long time ago. Maybe he thought that you were in his flat.
That could be too.
Yeah.
I mean, really, unless we can have some kind of a conversation with them via whatever, way we can. It's really just guessing, because I know most of the time on this show I say that the saddest thing I think about, ghosts, other than the fact that for whatever reason they either got stuck or chose to stay, or that part of it, is most of the time they're misunderstood. I mean, anytime that you're in your home or you're in a place that you think is yours, whether it's a hotel room or office, and something else comes in, you feel violated, but I would imagine sometimes they do too.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just, it's hard to say unless we could talk to that guy, and he very well might have, enjoyed having you around, and I just got used to you. What are you leaving for? And decided to whack you with his cane, or something. Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
But it could very well be.
Trained him for a couple of years,
yeah, that could very well be. And I know you've had experiences like that too, Steve, haven't you? I know you said you saw the guy. Who was the guy you saw on the corner that looked at a place?
Here in Portland, yeah. I was downtown, and there's some old buildings in downtown Portland. And just as I went around the corner, like to the left, this guy came around the corner to the right, and he was dressed in Victorian garb, but he looked distressed. He had this very strange countenance, just like, I don't know, like he was disturbed or upset. He wasn't really mad. And since I went around the corner, I hadn't gone more than a few steps, and I just whipped around and went back because I wanted to see the guy's outfit. I thought, is he an actor? Is there somebody doing a commercial? What's going on?
Right.
And just in the few seconds that it took me to turn around and go back around the corner,
he's not
was absolutely gone.
Yeah.
And the block that we were on was occupied by a whole building, and there were only like walls and windows there. There was no alleyways. There was no other doors unless he went through a window, and they were all closed. And across the street, I would have seen him on the other side. He didn't have time to do it. He was just, he was there, and then he wasn't.
Do you have? I've been thinking about this lately because, when I wrote my book, that was like a lifetime stuff, and that was like 3 years ago. And even after I finished it, I remembered other stuff that because I don't write things down enough.
Uh-huh.
I never have done really until I did that book. I hadn't done that, and so that was, although it might have appeared to be loads of stuff, it was over like 50 plus years,
Right.
But just in the last, I would say in the last sort of 9 months, maybe a year, I've just seen a lot of stuff, and I've had so many strange experiences which I hadn't had for a long time. I mean, I hadn't had them for quite a few years, really, not much. And then all of a sudden, loads of them. Mm. And I wondered whether that was something to do with my life and the way things have panned out, or whether it's something bigger than me, to do with the actual fabric of our reality,
Mark, I'm going to use one of your own quotes on you here. Sometimes when you take an interest in the paranormal takes an interest in you.
Yes, absolutely true.
I think I borrowed that, Steve.
But
it's good. Who's ever did stuff.
It is. It's so true, and I think both of what Mark is saying holds water, and I'll tell you why. I think that quote is very true, because the more you're aware of it. And isn't it funny, though, even though we're aware of it, like you said in the beginning of the episode, it's like when you're not thinking about it, it happens. You know, if you're saying, I'm going to see something, I'm going to see something, I'm going to see something, it doesn't happen. So it's
they never see it on these shows, do they? You never see it on these ghost shows.
That's
true.
They're
running around making a load of noise, being disrespectful.
Isn't it funny?
They're not going to see anything.
Yeah, I usually know when I'm going to see something. I feel it before I actually see something. It's hard to describe.
An area, there's
something in the air.
Washington State called Holt. And when I first entered that town, I'd never been there, never heard of it, never knew anything about it. I just knew something was off there. And then I couldn't get cell reception. When I got back out, I looked it up. Sure enough, the name Yakult is a Native American word for Valley of the Fire Demon. Nice. There's been all kinds of unexplained fires there. There are ghosts. They see tiny Native American braves, like about 3 feet tall. There's a phantom train. I know that's something else that interests you, Wyatt. I knew when I crossed into this little town that this place, there's something off here. There's something here. And I was right. It's that gut feeling, that spider sense or intuition or whatever you want to call it.
That's it. I usually feel it first. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't know. There's so many.
I know.
When I talk to you guys, it just goes. It flows. There's like 100 things I could just say. Yep. What about this? And boom. Yep. And it's like going off on a different tangent. Because I'll tell you one story I'd love to tell you. This is something that when I was researching my book, it's a story, because most of the things in the book are experiences that have been given to me by other people. From all over Cornwall and visitors to Cornwall. And 1 or 2 of them are borrowed. Well, I don't know what the numbers are really, but the only reason I've used them is because I love the story. I could have put 20 in there, but I'm just picking out the ones, cherry picking the best ones. And one of my favourite stories, I heard it years ago, and I sought it out. So, I was going to say lorry driver, but it's a truck driver in America. So a truck driver is coming down from the Midlands in England overnight. This is in the 1950s. And he's heading down from the Midlands to Falmouth, which is on the south Cornish coast. And he has to go down through the West Country and then over Bodmin Moor. Now, this is in the days before we have this road called the A30, which is like the major road right through the middle of Cornwall, really. And even now, it's not a big road. It's quite a small road, but it's quite a fast road now. But in those days, it wasn't great at all. And in fact, it's the same road that went past Bodmin Moor, Jamaica Inn, and still does, back in the 1750s, when it, 1750s, 76, whenever it was built. But it's obviously been updated a little bit since then. So he's coming down, he's going across the moor, and it's like, I think he said it was about 1 o'clock in the morning or something. He's more or less on his own. He's travelling west, and I've got to try and get my bearings right now because I'm in America, and I've got so confused driving on the wrong side of the road here. But he's going down, I think he's on the left. That's right, he's on the left-hand side of the road because he's in England. That is on that particular road, you're going west, because it's back to front to you. And he's going along in his lorry, and he made me think of this earlier when you said about when you're not thinking about stuff. Well, he was probably in the zone. He was probably just had a blank slate, just looking ahead, and he said it, because Bodmin Moor is quite high, and you get these really sort of nasty fogs, and you can't see anything. But they're patchy sometimes. So he sees this fog, and he's going through this patchy fog. He's sort of in it, and he's out of it. And he said all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, he did not see this car coming. A green convertible car suddenly comes straight at him and then goes off to his left. Now, that is basically, there's no road on your left. If you're travelling in England, if you're travelling to the west on the A30, there is no road on your left. It's the other way round, you see. It's like he should have been on the right-hand side, if you see what I mean, because we're the other way round to you. We're the other way round to you. So basically there was no road there. So he thinks that this driver who's suddenly seen this car come straight at him, he said it was a green, old-fashioned, and that was in the 50s, you thought it was old-fashioned, convertible. He said there were 4 men in it, and he said they were all, I don't know whether the driver was, but he said they were all half standing up in the car. One was holding a hat in his left hand, I think. Yeah, left hand. And he described the way they were dressed, and he said they were all singing, really loudly singing. Now, he got all that information in a split second as they passed him.
Wow.
But the whole thing about that is they obviously imprinted that image on him somehow. And he remembered it just like that. And I think he stopped his lorry, got out, had a look. No other traffic about. There's no car. There is no car. He's just seen like a ghost car. And he also remembered that it had it didn't have any proper lights on it, but it did have like an old-fashioned gas light between the windscreen and the door. He said.
That's amazing.
That is. Yeah.
And then it gets better. This is why I love this story. It gets better. So he sort of kept it to himself. His name was actually Patrick Humperson, so I remembered his actual name. So I think it was only a few months later. His job was delivering brand new trucks, lorries, to different. That's why he was going to Falmouth, because somebody had bought a lorry and he delivered it from the factory in the Midlands. So it's like about a 5-hour journey or so, probably longer in those days. And he kept the story to himself because he just didn't know what to make of it, and people would have, in those days particularly, they would have just laughed at him probably. And he became a coach driver, like a bus driver. And one day he's coming back from his duty and he's going back into his car park at St Ives, where I actually lived. Beautiful, beautiful town on the coast. And he's pulling into the car park and he sees all his new mates, all these bus drivers, coach drivers, and they're all standing around having a cigarette and a cup of tea, and they're all taking the mickey out of one bloke. And one of his bloke, this other guy, the one guy on his own, they're all laughing at him, but in a nice way, banter. And he's trying to tell them this story. So he gets out of his bus and he says, what's the crack here? What's going on? And they say, well, tell him your story, thinking that he would back them up and laugh at him as well, So this guy says, well, he said just last night, and he told the story, he'd seen the same thing. Exactly. He described exactly the same people in the same car, but he saw them about 20 miles away.
Wow.
And when the guy that researched this story originally, and I know him, he's about 90 now, he's got a paranormal group in Cornwall, which I belong to. Mm-hmm. That's a long story as well. I used to read his books when I was a kid, and I ended up meeting him.
That's wonderful.
And he invited me to join his group. So there's a few of his stories in the book. But when he was researching it, he found out that it's quite a common thing. People see ghost cars. Anyway, so we got talking about that, and I've definitely. I mean, I've seen. I had a motorbike behind me once, which just totally disappeared. I think that was in my book. I've had that happen quite a few times with stuff like that. Sometimes I'm not 100% sure whether they just turned off somewhere.
Right.
But sometimes they get right up behind you, uncomfortably close, and then they've gone.
Yes.
And I've seen an old truck. I think it was a Foden, a British truck. I think it's British. I was in Cornwall there as well, and I was with my daughter, and we were going through a roundabout, and it was waiting to pull out. And I had right away. I carried on. I looked at it. I thought, that's a cool truck, like 1950s or something. And we sort of drove through, and I said to my daughter, "Did you see that truck? It was really cool." And we looked in the mirror. There it was. I think I saw it actually before I asked her the question. It was in my mirror, so it did pull out and it did follow me. And I went to look again. Literally seconds later, it had gone.
Amazing.
And I asked my daughter, and I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, look in the mirror." And she said, "Where's it gone?" I said, "I don't know. I've got no idea." So she'd seen it. She'd seen it at a roundabout. And we looked to see where it could have gone. There was only one option it could have gone, and that was on the other side of the road, and it was a busy road. There was no way it would have got over there without waiting for 5 minutes, you know.
It's just so spooky. I mean, I think that's some of the spookiest stuff. I mean, obviously, you know, when you're in bed, you wake up and something's there. That's scary because you're not prepared. You're in a vulnerable position. But I think when you're in your car, you know, and the, you know, the haunted trucker stories and things that you hear like that, those are all very extra creepy too to me because you know, I've driven a truck. I drove a truck in the Army, and I've done a lot of driving. You know, and you're on those roads, and everything is dark. I've never passed. Well, that's not really true. I have passed people. You know, when you're driving and there's someone like not hit, they might be hitchhiking, they might just be walking. You have this every time you go by, you're always look in the mirror or look to your side to see their face when you go by. I don't know why we always do that. But there was this one time where I passed this guy, and I think the reason I looked was because I just got creepy feeling when I went by, and it almost seems like you slow down when you pass them. You know, in your time kind of slows. And I remember looking as I went by, and then I looked in the mirror as you pull kind of away, and the way their face was, it just wasn't normal. And I can't really describe it. It was like, it was almost like if you've ever heard of, Steve, who's that guy that does all the cryptid and black-eyed kids? Weatherly.
Oh, Weatherly. David Weatherly.
David Weatherly. Yeah. And he tells the story of the grinning man.
Oh, right, yeah.
It was like that. And that's so hard to describe when you say the grinning man. Well, it's not just a man that's got like a big smile. It's different.
The face is just
almost like a Joker. Yeah.
Sort of Jack Nicholson comes to mind in that. Yeah.
And I remember seeing that. I was really young. I was, you know, young driver, and you know, like when you go out and you're doing your real long drives, like your first 500-mile, you know, road trip or something that you're doing by yourself or something. And I always just chalked it off like, okay, you're tired. You know, it's either time to pull over and get coffee or just pull over and get a room, get sleep. But it never went away. And like you say, when you're writing a book and you're doing these shows and you're talking and you talk with other like-minded people, a lot of times something they say will spark a memory.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know, and as soon as you get done with that book, you think, gosh, I had 15 more stories I could have put in there.
I
you know.
know. Yeah.
And Steve's got, thousands of them, because you guys collect them from other people too. And now I kind of collect them from other people too, doing the podcast. So, and I never forgot that. And I just kind of wanted to put it out of my head, like, no, that didn't really happen. But just like when your Henry VIII looked at you, they definitely catch eyes.
I don't think it was Henry VIII, but
no, but you know what I mean.
Somebody in his style.
Somebody in that style. But when they catch eyes, and they're looking at your eyes.
Creepy,
that's creepy. That's so creepy, man.
That is so weird to understand it. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't. That's the thing about this. I think some people get into this subject, and and there's different reasons people do. The number one reason is probably because they've had an experience themselves, and they want to understand some of that. And then you start getting into everything else, and it's hard to go through multiple stories to find one that kind of matches yours.
Yeah.
When Steve and I did our book, that's kind of what I was trying to do. Was say, here's some stuff. See if any of yours match up with these different kinds.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe help them along a little bit. Like say, this is the way it sounded. This is the way it looked. There was a crackling sound, that kind of stuff. Because, we're definitely collecting information for whatever reason. And we're trying to put things in categories, but they never quite fit in in categories. They don't want to be in all these little nice, neat little categories, because we all, the deeper you start digging, you dig a little bit deeper, and we start asking questions like we're asking tonight. What do they see? Like that grinning man that I passed. I don't know if it was a grinning man, but it would definitely fit the picture. Is he just doing that for my benefit? Is he just wandering out there along to startle drivers? One of my favorite ones is a truck driver story where the guy's driving along, and I can't remember where it was now. I want to say Route 66, but I could be wrong. And he's driving along, and all of a sudden, he just gets this feeling, and I'm just getting creeped thinking about it. All over him, hair standing up on his arms and the back of his neck and everything, and he's just driving along. And, you're driving a big rig like that. You're just trying to keep that sucker on the road, and you're trying to get, you're long hauling, and you're trying to keep up a good speed at the same time. Yeah. And all of a sudden, he just gets this creepy feeling. It gets real cold, and then all of a sudden, materializing next to him in the passenger seat is just this big old man with obviously looking like he's in a state of decay.
Right.
His skin and everything else, you can tell he was long dead. His eyes are, bulbous and everything.
Yeah.
And he's just looking kind of down, and he's not saying anything. He's just sitting there. And the guy's trying to keep this truck on the road, but I don't know how he did it. I think I'd have drove right off the road. But he's not saying anything. He's just driving along like, is this guy going to say something to me? I mean, how do you do stuff like that?
I know. It's absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Keep your composure this way.
Yeah.
And he said he drove along because he was going at a pretty good speed, like I said. This is back in the day, too, when, America, you got your stuff from truckers and trains, and they had those long haul, and it was a great big thing going on about, speed and staying awake and, lots of, you didn't let anything hold you back. They, on time. So this guy must have been really dedicated because not even a ghostly ghoul could make him slow down. And he's just driving along, and he got this distinct feeling. He said he got this feeling of like a Great Depression. I mean, this is how long this, it took for this this experience, because he starts feeling very depressed, and he started feeling, like this guy was trying to tell him to slow down and be more cautious. He was getting all these feelings from this man who never looked at him. He just kept his head down. And the guy slowed down, and he just, everything started, to make him be more cautious and everything. And then all of a sudden, at this one cross thing, a guy ran a red light and took off. And he just tried to stop. And you can't stop a tractor trailer on a dime. You just can't do it.
Right.
but he was slowed down enough that he missed that.
So whoever that guy was
and
like
when he stopped to look, got his everything together because he had, avoided this accident. You kind of get your adrenaline and get your breath. He actually turned to the guy because it thought to him, "Thank you," and he was gone.
Yeah.
So what in the world? I mean, you've got stories like that. You got hitchhikers and...
I was just thinking of a hitchhiker.
Creepy. Would you pick up a hitchhiking ghost, Steve?
Maybe. There's a lady out of Minnesota named Annie Wilder who's written a book of nothing but trucker ghost stories. That's one of my favorite reads. If you like stories of the road and weird encounters and things, that's a good book. Yeah. And I've had a couple of things like that happen. Nothing really... Probably the weirdest one, it's in my book, my third book, My Strange World. There was a guy on a motorcycle with no headlights on that got behind my car and followed me. And I thought it was somebody probably having electrical problems, and he was going to follow me until he got to a safer.
Yes, I remember that one.
In the middle of the country. And I knew, there's a stop sign coming up. I stop, I get out, there's no motorcycle there. I don't hear a motorcycle. I don't see, there's no place he could have went.
That's right.
And then he ended up behind me again, and it happened for a while, and then I noticed that there's a creek there in that part of East Tennessee called Beaver Creek. After I crossed Beaver Creek, he was gone for good, and that's the old thing about ghosts not being able to cross running water. So,
yeah.
Oh right, yeah.
And then my dad had a strange thing happen to him one time like that. He was on a curvy backwoods road out somewhere, and so this car flew past him, going way too fast on the wrong side of the road on a curve, past him, and then he saw it ahead of him. He saw the taillights that it took a sharp right turn, and he thought it had gone into the ditch. Right. So when he gets up to where it is, he gets out, going to see if they're injured, but there was no car there. He saw the headlights disappear, but there was no road there, and there was actually a little dip and then a hill that went almost straight up. There was no place they could have gone.
Well, we had a case recently, not in recent years anyway, in Guildford in Surrey in southeast England. Several cars had reported seeing a crash just by a service station quite near Guildford, and they'd reported it to the police, and the police kept going out, and of course there was never any crash there. And eventually some guy was coming along, and he saw this man stood at the side of the road, just sort of fairly short of this service station. And when I say service, I mean the restaurants and all this stuff, the whole works. And he was I think he was like pointing towards the woods or something. And they eventually, people kept reporting this crash, it didn't exist sort of thing. And when they went out there, somebody decided they'd look a bit further, and they went into these woods that were just off the road, and there was a car there, and they found a body on the bank which was really decomposed. It'd been there for about a year or something, and the car was actually sort of overgrown, so the car was almost hidden. And they worked out with it, I think it was like a year or 2 years, whatever, and it was a convict who'd been released. And he escaped. I was like, he escaped. He wasn't like a really serious bad criminal, but he'd escaped, and he was just unlucky enough to have an accident, lose control somehow, and he managed to get out the car and crawl away, but he must have died on the bank. But anyway, when I was reading this story, I thought, well, maybe there's more to that. Maybe he had somebody else with him, and the other person just managed to get away. Didn't want to be sort of touched, when the story came out, what were you doing in the car with this escaped convict? And so maybe there's someone out there that knows more about that story, but they're not going to come forward.
I got to tell you, you guys made me remember another one. This is, and now that I've remembered it, this has got to be one of my favorites. Okay. I don't remember names. I don't remember particulars or dates or where it happened, but there was a mother and her young son. I believe he was 2. I could be off on that by a little bit.
You read my mind, Cisco.
Did you remember this
story?
Oh God! Then help me with it. Okay, she went on this particular route between these two places. I can't remember if she was going from her mother's to her sister's, or it was something along those ways. And she always took this route. And one of the routes that she, along the route that she always took, there was a road with a lot of woods. So she came up missing. She didn't arrive. And, after a while, they start getting really worried. And, they had people out. They had I believe it was state troopers out looking. They didn't see anything, nothing to miss. Okay, no car, no nothing. And they kept doing this. And I believe, Steve, wasn't it like a day or two? It was at least 2 days, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a fair amount of time.
Yeah, it sure was. And some other drivers in the night kept reporting that they saw a naked woman lying along the side of the road. And they didn't stop because they were scared, I guess, went to the next place, made a phone call, and reported it. And this trooper goes out and looks, no woman. And this kind of thing was going on. Well, it made the news, didn't it, Steve? And the sister caught it and said, by the description, she said, "That's her. I know it's her." Made her husband get in the car and says, "We're going there now." She gets in the car with him. They drive out there to the spot where they said they saw this woman. Of course, there was no woman, but she called the state troopers. She says, "I want you to come out here because I have this feeling this was her. I can't explain it. Please come out and look one more time."
Yeah.
And they're out there, and the trooper gets out of the car, and he's looking around, and he notices a glimmer or something caught his eye through the woods. He goes in to where like a little bit of the weeds and stuff have been taken down, follows it through, and there's the mother dead in the car, and the little boy is barely clinging to life.
So she
was trapped in there. There was no way she could have got out.
Exactly.
No.
Laid on the side of the road and then got back in the car. She was trapped in the car and died instantly, I think.
Yeah. She died instantly on impact.
Saved her child.
Yep. She did a mother's love. A mother's love. She did everything she could to save that boy. And that boy was clinging to. Now, when they told the story when I saw it, the boy, it was like 10 years later. Now the boy's like 12 or 13. And he said that there was a woman with lots of light that stood outside of the car and told him to hang on and hold on. And he thought it was an angel.
Wow.
Yeah. And he told that story. Yeah, isn't that amazing? And he wound up living with the aunt who found him. So it was a lovely story all around, but that's one of my favorites. And I can remember the police officer talking about it too, and he had seen it. He said he couldn't believe it because there was no way you could see that car from there. And they had looked and looked and looked. So that's a lovely story. I mean, it's terrible that happened, but if anybody can do it, it's a mom.
Incredible.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah. Highway stories.
I've got one more I want to tell while we're
please
talking
do.
about this story.
Please do.
Back in the 80s, I was going over to Middle Tennessee, where my dad was from, and the highway that you had to take to get there was no interstate or anything that would take you there. Very curvy back road through the middle of nowhere. And it was dark. I was going over to the family farm there. Well, I come around the curve, and there's this car going kind of slow. It was an older, like a Chevy Impala, probably from the early 70s or something. And I get up kind of close to it, and all of a sudden, a head pops out of the driver's side window, and it's wearing a clown mask.
Oh, God.
And the guy is, like, staring at me, and he keeps staring.
Right.
And this goes on for miles. I mean, he's kind of driving slow, but he's wobbling a little bit, but he's not even looking at the road.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what kind of maniac is this? I didn't know whether to turn around and go the other. Well, finally, I get to a wide spot in the road with a broken yellow, and I just roared past the guy. Well, as I go past, the guy is absolutely laughing his butt off. What he had done, it was a 3/4 mask. It covered 3/4 of the head. He had it on backwards so that he could see ahead, and he's leaning over with his head out the window. And all I see is this head looking back at me. And miles and curvy road. But this guy's not even watching the road. He's insane. And I've always thought about that. If I'd stopped or if I'd turned around, and I would always thought there was some sort of phantom killer clown or something in a car,
Oh
but it was
gosh,
just some guy having a laugh. And that's pretty original. I would
that
never
is.
thought of that, but I have used it since then. I've done the same thing a couple times.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, guys,
Not
I'm
so scary,
telling
but
you,
it
man.
does show you how something can seem really scary that isn't always, but it can go the other way too.
You can, yeah.
Well, I got both of you here before we end this because because gosh, we could go on for hours, I think, like this. And we'll have to do it again. We'll have to do a part two because I would love to get you guys on and just do a whole show of your favorite uncannies, like cryptids and odd things. And, we had opened up a little bit talking about time slips. I'd love to come back and talk about portals and, things like, the Skinwalker Ranch where they see, just this thing open up and then stuff start crawling out of it and coming over here. And wow, just all that stuff. We could just talk forever. But I would love to find out that one story that kind of shook both of you, that you thought you might have had it figured out, but something happened that just flipped it all for you, and now you're thinking, man, I don't have any of this. This is just crazy. To me, that story is the Gettysburg College one, because there's so many aspects to that. How did the people in the elevator look to the guy, and like Steve said, were they angels to him? Did he see him and just they look like orderlies or other soldiers? Come help me. No clue. Yeah. That one has so many questions for me, and I've been there. I've been there, and I'd love it if one day we could all just plan a trip and all meet there one time. I know you'd love to go to Gettysburg.
Well, I looked at we have just in North Cornwall. There's a battlefield site, literally, I suppose, a mile away from where I live, and so much activity around there. Not just the battlefield site, but various other things that have happened around there. And when I started researching the book and getting the stories coming from different people, I found that there was almost like a sort of triangle of places where so much weird stuff goes on all the time. Now, one of them, I don't know how long we got, but it's in the book. But without going into detail, I ended up, about 2 years ago now, I suppose, I moved into a smaller place with some big, I don't want to talk about it on the public really, but I ended up living in a sort of temporary place, if you like, temporary housing situation, while I was sorting my life out really. And my son was with me. My son was in. I hired a massive room and had everything in there for a while. And I knew all the people, and that was the advantage. I knew the people. They were mostly younger than me, and it had been used as I'll give you a really quick version. It had been used as an adventure place for like surfers and cliff climbers and all this sort of stuff, because it was right on the coast, and it had a history of that for like 25 years or 30 years maybe. And when I moved into this place, there were certain rooms that were available, but most of them were full of sort of old surfboards and stuff and a bit messy. And I was given a choice of a few rooms, and I saw this one particular room, and I thought, yeah, that'll do me. And I knew the guy that ran this place, and he said, yeah, you can have that room. But to cut long story short, I went in that room. Within the first few days, when I was sort of moving stuff in, this had like a shared kitchen. It was a big house. Had my back, so I was actually at the sink, doing stuff, washing cups or something. And a guy came in behind me, and I was the only one at the house that day, but it was a shared house. There were about 5 or 6 people lived there, and there were a lot of visitors coming and going for various reasons, which I can't really go into on the radio, but so anyway, this guy walked past me, and I didn't really get a good look at him, but he walked past me and behind me, and in Cornwall they just say, all right. It's just like that, it's just like the Greek thing, and that was it. He disappeared behind me and he went towards the stairs. I didn't know where he went. I didn't see him leave. Didn't really think about it. And then gradually this story evolved, and I was actually there. I actually experienced it. So what happened? the room that I had, which they didn't tell me when I first went there, had belonged to a guy who, his real name was Simon Faulkner, but they called him Scatman, and he was a surfer. And I didn't know him. I didn't know him in life, but he died when he was about 31, 32, something like that. And he got cancer. He was well travelled. He literally, all these surfers that live in Cornwall, they go all over the world. They literally go, Mexico, South Africa, you name it. Australia, America, they go everywhere. He was one of those guys, and sort of a real action man, He'd lived in that room that I was living in for about nearly a year. And I didn't know that when I first got there. And then gradually I started meeting people within the house, people who lived there, and people who were friends of it. It was such a sociable place, lovely place. And they all knew, most of them knew this guy. And most of these people said that they'd seen him since his death. There were so many stories. It was like I'd been put there to get his story. That's how it turned out in the end. Honestly, you'd have to, if you read it, because I've tried to put all the bits and pieces down, because you're just getting like a skimmed version.
Right.
But so many people I met there. I mean, one guy was it was at the end of a country lane, just off the cliff. So it's not near the beaches, but it's like a very high cliff. And one guy was he'd been one of his mates in life. He was going along in a van with his surfboards in the back, coming back to the house when he was a tenant there. And he said, it's late at night. He was coming back about sort of 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said there was a guy on a bike in front of him. He instantly recognised him. He thought, oh, it's Scatman. But he didn't think, when you're sort of on automatic pilot, he didn't think, oh, he died like a few months ago. It's not him. And he basically went past him, and then he thought, strange, that couldn't have been him. So he looked in the mirror, and like we were saying earlier, he wasn't there. Another guy who was a friend of his was walking up that same lane in the same place, more or less. And he was just walking along, heading back to the house again. And he suddenly felt something was behind him. He could hear a bicycle. And he just launched himself into the hedge. When I say a hedge, it's like a bank, like a raised bank with big hedge on it. Mm-hmm. The Cornish hedges are sort of unique. And he threw himself into it because he thought something was about to mow him down, a bike. And there was nothing there. But he said the moment it happened, he saw his friend in his mind. He didn't see him like physically. Right. He saw his friend, and his friend was laughing. And, because that's the sort of, you would have done it with him.
Yeah.
And there were numerous instances of this. He was, there's two ghostly surfers in my book. The book starts with two of them. They probably knew each other at some stage, I don't know. But I had an experience where I was sat in my room and I felt that he'd come, because they used to tease me and say, have you met him yet? All these different people. And I said, well, I haven't actually. There was just that instance where a guy walked past me who was dressed exactly as he was later described to me. So I think I might have done. I'm not 100% sure. So anyway, yeah, best to read books. There's a lot more to it than that.
That's amazing.
But I eventually met his brother, and I managed to, when we left that property, we cleared it all out, and I went up into the attic, which was like, it had like 30 plus years of stuff just shoved in it, like old surfboards and mounting boards and kit, all sorts of kit, ropes and climbing kit. And I found a lot of old photographs from the guy and sort of some really personal stuff as well. And I managed to track his brother down, and I took it to his brother.
Good.
And I needed permission from his brother to publish this story because I didn't want to offend the family.
Right.
And I'd never met him before. He ran a motorcycle business in the town. And it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had in my life because I had to say, oh, hi, my name's Mark. I'm writing a book about Cornish ghost stories. And, by the way, one of them is about your brother who regularly appears to people. I mean, I've got so many witnesses to it.
Wow.
And I had to sort of break that to him gently. And he was very good about it. He said, well, yeah, he said, that's very likely. And he didn't sort of write it off. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, within a few months of that, I managed to find all this stuff that belonged to his brother, and I took that stuff along to him, and I said, "Oh, you might want to read this chapter and just tell me if there's any inaccuracies there about him. Mm-hmm. Just let me know. If you don't want it published, tell me, and I won't." And he had it for a long time. He had it for about a month, I think, and he'd sent it to various friends of this guy, just to make sure that they were okay with it. And it eventually came back to him, and he had about 3 or 4 of the people he'd approached, including his mother, himself, the brother, 2 of his best mates. He made a few minor corrections, like telling me that certain people, I'd got the wrong name or whatever.
Right.
But everything else he was quite happy with. And that's the story I've got.
Wow.
So,
that's awesome.
Isn't that awesome? To be able to tell, and I lived it. I literally lived it with these people who had actually, they didn't, there was a mixture of people. And not all of them were friends with each other. They were like separate, if you like. Mm-hmm. And they all had similar stories. There was, oh my God, it's just a great story. It really is. When you've got something like that, and I've had, I don't want to say similar experience, but I've had to talk to loved ones about their loved one, haunting a spot or something like that. Right. But it's usually the other way around. Usually they either know it first, or they have a suspicion, or they're in the house, or to go through all that and then have to go to somebody and bring them their stuff and say, that he's still around. You'd think that you'd have different mixed reactions. The first one you'd think is like they don't believe you. The other one is if they believe you. I had to tell a family member of mine about, first of all, why is my mom always coming to me and not them? And I have to try to approach it like, everybody's got like a different energy. It doesn't mean anything good or bad. It could be that you're closed off. I have a sinking suspicion that a lot of the people in my family have sensitivities. But in a lot of ways, everybody was taught to close it off. And I also come from a Native American background, and we've moved away from that spiritual just knowing, like Native Americans did. But I actually had to go to a sister and go like, Mom says hi. It's like, and you just kind of figured, of course she was mad. It's like, why didn't she come tell me that? And I'm like, I can't answer that. It's not that I'm special. So that's what I was thinking when you were telling that story. Like maybe the brother was thinking, why doesn't he come see me? That's
He was very emotional. It was really
wonderful.
It was very difficult. He got very emotional when I first told him a story.
Yeah.
And I could see he was sort of tearing up a bit. So,
well, Mark,
we just left it with him,
Yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of think, too, that in a way he did. Maybe in some way, without you knowing it, he set that up and found a way to get his stuff to his brother and did say hi.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
That's beautiful, man. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I've not told you all the facts because it would take me too long to remember it all.
Right. Well, I'm definitely go back and read that again because and get in there with a different, just a different thought behind it, because I think that's just as beautiful as they find so many different ways, sometimes, and sometimes we miss them. Like Steve and I always talk about all the times, all the people that go through life and we get harried, and before you know it, it's night again. You wake up and it's night again. You go to sleep and you wake up again. Our days fly by. And you miss a lot of the miracles. That's a miracle to me, if you look at the definition. Mm-hmm. And it's really neat. Like the mom in the car, saving the little boy.
Exactly.
Those kind are just, I think, my favorites. You can keep the ones that show up in the passenger seat while you're driving. I'm not a big fan of those. But... that's beautiful, man. That's really, really beautiful. Yeah. Okay, now tell us before we forget. Okay. How do we find your book? Tell us.
It's not. I literally am just getting towards the end of it now.
Okay.
I'm just.
That's the second one.
Yeah, it's going to. Well, I'm working on the title, and I'm still not 100% certain, but I'm thinking Mysteries of Cornwall, the Granite Kingdom, and
Wow.
there's a reason
Nice.
behind all that.
Sure.
There's a preponderance of granite in Cornwall.
Mm-hmm.
The kingdom that is accurate because they had their own kings until about the 6th century, and Mysteries speaks for itself because
Right.
it's quite. There's lots of UFO stuff around where in Cornwall, lots of it, and I'm lucky enough to know the guy that runs the Cornwall UFO Research Group. He's been a good friend for about 10 years now.
Wow.
And he's given me some real scoops. Oh, I've got to tell you, so it's a fantastic photo, which has never been published, which I'm going to publish in this book. It's a local church which has an amazing history. You haven't got time to it all now, but it's got amazing history, like a very bloody history and ghostly, lots of ghost sightings. And my brain's gone to sleep now. Oh God! I've got one of those senior moments.
I know. Yeah, you were talking about the photo that was in your book.
Yeah, the photo. Yeah. So anyway, another guy who supplied me with stories. Thanks for that. Another guy who supplied me with a few various stories because he's a very sensitive guy and he has lots of experiences himself. He's told me there's a couple of photos actually which he's given me. One is there's a big GCHQ. It's called. It's like the British government. I forget what exactly it means, but it's a place at Cambridge in sort of north of London. And there's another one that most people don't know about, which is in Cornwall, and it's about a mile away from where I lived. And it has quite a lot of activity over it because I think they're interested in it. Whoever these people are, these beings, whatever, I think they're quite interested in it. In fact, I know who they are. So lots of sightings around there. This particular guy was on a sort of one of these works courses where they sort of go and learn how to live in the woods and this sort of thing. And he was sort of camping out overnight. They had to make their own shelters and all this sort of stuff and work in little teams. And his story, he took himself off into a hill looking over the bay. And opposite him on the other side of the valley is this big GCHQ base, which has huge satellite dishes. I mean, massive. And it's basically a spy station. And the CIA and the British government work together out of this base. And they don't tell you what they're doing. But a lot of people who live in Bude work there. And, of course, they sign the Official Secrets Act. They can't tell you what they do. The old joke is, yeah, we can tell you, but we'd have to shoot you afterwards, you know. And they all tell it like it's never been told before, and they think it's hilarious. But and anyway, the lights came on, and he said it was a beautiful summer's day, and he was up there on his own. The rest of the people with him didn't want to go up there. They were quite happy down there having a campfire. And he said just up there on his own, enjoying the night, watching the sun gradually go down. He said the sun went down. All the lights came on at the base, which is not unusual. They do. And he said it was one of the prettiest things he'd ever seen. He said all these dishes just sort of lit up with this lovely glow. And as he was watching this, he thought he'd take a photograph because it looked so pretty. So he had a Nokia 35, I think it was. This was the 90s possibly. So he just took some random photos. I think he took 3 photos. And while he was taking it, he heard a jet. He said he felt strange, like he had the hairs in the back of his neck stood up. And it just came from nowhere, this feeling. And he felt that, he suddenly felt that he was not alone and he was being watched. But he'd taken the photographs, and then he heard 2 jets coming over the base. And the 2 jets are very relevant when you read my book, because that happens over and over and over again. Every time there's a UFO sighting in Cornwall, and probably elsewhere, they send 2 jets up. It's never one. It's always 2. And they pursue these things, wherever they are, wherever they're from. He didn't see anything. He said he just took a picture of the base. That was what he was doing. But only because he thought it looked pretty, Anyway, for the next morning, I can't far as he could, and then he lost his oxygen and he crashed or something. Do you remember that case?
Do you know that one, Steve?
Yeah, I vaguely remember it.
Yeah. No, I just wonder if that's partly the reason why they go up in pairs now. Maybe.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
one
that would
pilot will
stand to
tell the other
reason.
pilot not to get carried away. But I don't know.
Wow.
But anyway, sorry, I'm boring you. By the way.
No.
But the other one I
not
was
at
going to
all.
tell you about, the other photograph was in this haunted church. Get back to that one. He was with his son-in-law, and he was just taking random pictures of his son-in-law around the church. Very, very old church, sort of 1300 and something. And he'd got loads and loads of orb activity, and but the picture that fascinated him and me, and he's let me publish it, is a picture of his son stood by the old church organ. And on the bench alongside him, which he didn't see, neither of them saw this, there's a little man, or it could be a woman, but I think it's a man. There's a little man, and this little man is sort of half turning around. He's like sat on the bench, and he's looking at them, or he appears to be looking at them, like a little bony old man.
Oh.
And you can clearly see it's a man. And the point about the photo is he got this photo I think it was in the 90s, and I think his son, it was either his son or his son-in-law, I can't remember now. He kept it quiet, and he didn't want his name on it. He didn't want any attention, but this guy has actually let me publish it. He said as long as I change the names, he's happy. And it is an amazing photograph. I mean, it really is. And the thing is, he's not a technical guy. He's not capable of, what's the word, faking it. He just, and he wouldn't. I know the guy, he wouldn't do it anyway.
Right. And see, that's the thing. Steve and I have talked about this multiple times. I think we've almost out-teched ourselves. And when all of us were younger, we'd dig through these ghost books. Boy, if we saw a picture of a ghost, we'd just savor it, And now they're all over the place. And if you took that picture, if you did something or you didn't do something,
Yeah.
And people, the person you're getting it from, but there's so much different stuff out there, and that's it. I can't look at a picture and tell you if it is or isn't. I take it for what the person's saying it is, because I don't want to miss the miracle. You know what I mean? Like we were talking earlier, if somebody else can look at it and, for forensic photography or whatever, and be able to tell the pixels and this, that's a different story. But I love the stories that go with the pictures. And I'm telling you guys, I have loved the stories tonight. Steve, you too, right?
I've enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful.
It's got to be one of my favorite episodes.
I know. I'm so glad to finally have you on, Mark. And you'll come back, won't you?
I will. I'd love to.
Yes, and I'd love to, like I said, do one where, we're talking about cryptids and we get into that other stuff too. I just love it.
Well,
I just love it.
I can talk to you about mermaids till the cows come home, if that makes sense.
Oh, wow, that'd be great. Oh, that'd be wonderful. We'll plan it.
I've done a lot of research on mermaids, yeah.
Yes, well, that's wonderful. And
and
we'll plan it.
I'm working on all the others, but...
And maybe, soon when you're on this side of the pond for your time here, we can all meet somewhere. Because wouldn't it be great if we could go sit down at a nice haunted pub and have a beer or two?
It would. You're in the Northwest, aren't you, Steve?
Yeah, Portland, Oregon.
Cisco, you're in New York.
Completely the other area. Completely the other side.
And I'm like stuck in the middle.
You're stuck in the middle. Maybe we'll have to come and meet you halfway. I told Steve, I Googled it. He can actually make it here on a bicycle in, 2 weeks, Steve, was it?
Yeah, that's what if I don't stop and rest.
Yeah, exactly. So funny. Okay, so it's Wyatt's Weird World, and that is available on Kindle. And no, not Kindle.
I'm not. I'm more interested about. To be honest, it's the book I'm working on now. But I'm more, which will be out soon. Which is Mysteries of Cornwall.
Okay.
The Granite Kingdom.
Okay.
And shortly after that one, that one's nearly going to be out in the next few weeks.
Oh, good.
And after that one, I'm sort of halfway through one, which is going to be the Legends, which is going to be, the mermaids and the Spriggans and the Piskies.
Oh, wonderful.
That'll be awesome.
Yes. you'll have to come back on and talk about both of those, and we're going to get you on and just do ghosts again. This was wonderful. I've had a wonderful time tonight. And Steve, yours is on Kindle.
Yeah.
Your books?
Kindle exclusively right now. I hope to do a paperback edition someday. And get around to it. And don't forget your book that I'm also a part of.
Yes.
Find that on Kindle.
Yes, and Mark read it, and he said he liked it.
I loved it. I still dip into it. I've got so many books on the go. I've just bought David Weatherly's new book. Actually, I'm just sort of getting into that tonight. That looks really good. I've just had a skim through it.
Oh yeah. He does.
Also,
he does good stuff. And
say that Cisco just narrated one of the stories from her book for my YouTube channel, 13 Past Midnight, where normally I narrate stories from my books, and then I had her come on
love that.
and do one of hers. I've had Shannon LeGros, I've had Cat Ward, I've had some great people come on and as guest narrators. So,
Mark will have to do one for you. You get Mark to do one.
I would love
that would be awesome. You could either pick one of your own. You've got so many there.
Oh, that would be great.
I can find one for you, but we'll talk about that offline.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's great fun, and everybody check that out. It's 13 Past Midnight. And it's on YouTube, and Steve and I are working on a YouTube channel for ours too. So you come back, Mark, and it's been absolutely wonderful having you.
Thank you very much, Cisco. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Steve.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Good night, you guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank both Steve Stockton, and his books are all on Kindle. He's got like 3 or 4 of them now, and of course ours. We're all children in the wilderness of the afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. And as you can hear from everybody here tonight, it seems like we've all had haunted lives, and that sounds so scary. And I guess if you look back at it and you just take all the experiences and compound them, it has been quite a life for all 3 of us to see all these different things. And I can't thank Mark Anthony Wyatt enough. That's Wyatt's Weird World, and that is available on Kindle, and he's got his 2 new ones coming out, so look for those, and I'll make sure I announce them here on the show when they come out. And we're going to have Mark back, because that was just jam-packed fun night, and I hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget, you can get all our swag on tpublic.com. I'll put the link in the show notes. I'll put the link to Mark's book in the show notes, and of course Steve's as well. And don't forget Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast Gatekeepers on Facebook group. Everybody's in there. Mark's in there. So if you want to get in contact with Mark, Steve, or me, we're all in there as well. Or if you want to contact me directly, as always, journeythroughthegate@gmail.com. And you find us on Libsyn, and you find us on radio and podcast.com. It's a great network over there with a lot of great shows like Beyond Belief with Justin Cancellari and Cat Ward's Paranormal Heart and Brian Bowden's Nobo Boomy. Inside the Goblin Universe. There's a lot of different good shows over there, so check that out. And you can find us on all of the other podcast catchers and Apple Music and all that. So there's that. Announcements coming up. Just trying to get out some good shows for you guys. Sorry I've gone down to 2 a month. I had to switch jobs and everything got kind of tossed asunder a little bit. Getting everything, rescheduled out here. We hope to go back to every week. I really appreciate all the listeners hanging in there and saying great things. The book on Kindle has got 5-star reviews and people are enjoying it, and it's wonderful. Also, like I said, check out Steve's 13 Past Midnight on YouTube. I'm going to be reading a couple of stories, kind of audio clips from the book, telling little parts of the chapters and stuff. And we just did one. It's called, it's from the Jumpers and Grinners and a Shot of Tequila, No Salt chapter. That's doing really good. Steve and I are coming up with our own YouTube channel as well. And there's just so much going on. So thank you guys. You know I love you listeners. Thank you so much for your input on the Gatekeepers page. Love all of the people putting stuff up there. It's a great group of people. And I just love you. And I thank you so much for hanging with me and going through this. We're up to, episode 45. And, I'm just proud of each and every one of them. And I'm proud of you guys going out there and trying to get information and writing me your stories and contacting me and telling me I'm meeting such wonderful people. And the most important person is the one who listens to this podcast, and the listeners and the ones who share and encourage and the lovely things you say. And I love each and every one of you. So thanks for sharing all this with me. The most important thing, other than listeners, is, we always give a little piece of advice at the end of the show. And although we don't have all the answers, and we are always asking questions, because every time you find out something, 10, 20 questions pop up. That's just this subject. The one thing we do know is you better keep your feet under those covers, and you better keep that closet door shut. Because there are things that go bump in the night.